Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Forge is an area for me to talk about Magic, Commander, and anything else. Now, I put off recording this for most of the week because I really wanted to gather my thoughts about things, but here it is. The discourse about Wizards of the Coast having the 30th edition collector Proxies. I've seen a lot of discourse about the $1,000, a lot of discourse about so many different variations of it. I am of a firm believing that the $1,000 would be justifiable if it was a full set of Power 9 and dual lands. If you did that, I think it would be worth the $1,000. That being said, I will not be spending $1,000 on proxies when I can just print whatever I need to. And my thing is, they're essentially saying that proxies are okay because they're going to make them. So there is nothing that says that you as a player should not be able to just say print off whatever card you want, shove it into a sleeve over a regular, basic land, and have a dual land. And that is all I'm going to say about that. Because, we don't need to go into that any farther. There is other stuff from that stream, but that's the main takeaway. Now, as far as the special cards that are coming out with pre-releases that supposedly started with Dominaria United, I didn't see anybody open any of those, so I have no idea what they're talking about. That being said, that was kind of the headspace I was in all week, and it just kind of came to a point where I said, you know what? It doesn't matter, because the people that have the disposable income to do that and want that will buy it. I don't care. It is miles beyond what I want from Magic the Gathering. I will buy the singles that I want, the commander decks that I want, and that's it. And for the most part, when I'm buying commander decks, it's mostly for parts and pieces for other decks. Very rarely do I buy one of their commander decks and actually decide that I'm going to build that out. I think the last one was Henzi Toolbox Tori. Yeah, that's kind of it. I don't really need to stretch this point out any farther. So I'll see you in a couple of seconds. And we're going to talk about my problem with white. I'll be right back. I just want to take a minute to tell you about my Patreon. I know times are hard for everybody, and I know it isn't easy to shuffle around bills and stuff. Believe me, I know that. But if you would like to help support the podcast, you can find the links to my Patreon in my link tree, which is always put into the description of either the video or the audio, wherever you're listening to it. It would really mean the world to me. Honestly, I'm just struggling to make ends meet most weeks. But that's it. That's all. If you want to help, the links will be where you can find them. And welcome back. Now, in the first part, I mentioned my issue with white. And it's not the fact that it's the color white. It's the fact that I have repeatedly built white decks to prove the fact that they can hang at just about any table. So it started with my Linden 30 land special hyper aggro deck. And then I built Nadar, which is mono white dungeons. Then I built Adeline, which was mono white tokens with a human sub theme. Well, more recently I put together two more. The first one being Icing Death Frost Tyrant as a mono white Voltron deck, And then I built a partner, or background, I guess, deck, being the newest, with Lysel Vakith's Champion with a Noble Heritage. And it just got me thinking, I build white decks, and sure, they have cards that they share between them, but on the whole, they're all fairly different and centered around different principles. So today we're going to go over my Lysel, I'm just going to call her that because the rest of it's redundant, deck with the Noble Heritage. Lysel is a 3/3 Gith Warrior for 2 and a white. And she says, if you would put one or more counters on a creature or planeswalker you control, or on yourself, you put that many plus 1 of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. And choose a background. Now the background we chose was Noble Heritage. It's an enchantment background for 1 and a white. Commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters the battlefield, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. Now, the slight upside of them putting counters on their creatures is fine, but with Noble Heritage being 2 and Lysel being 3, as long as I have 3 lands in my opening hand, I can turn 2 Noble Heritage, turn 3 Lysel. She is a 3/3. She enters. I put 2 counters on her. She makes it 3. I have a turn 3 6/6. Yeah. Now, when I started putting this together, I immediately thought of a few cards that came to mind for what I wanted to do. The first one being Orzhov Advocist. It's a 1/4 human advisor for 2 and a white. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. If a player does, creatures that player control can't attack you or a planeswalker you control until your next turn. So that's like a backup to our Noble Heritage. Then we just have things that you're not necessarily going to look for in other decks. Things like Kelith, Sunmane Familiar. It's a 1/1 horse for 1 and a white, but whenever a commander you control attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It has partner, but that's not anything we're doing here today. And as I was kind of going through cards looking for stuff, I realized a couple of abilities that really went well with what she was trying to do, and those would be things like Training and Mentor. So for Mentor, I have Light of the Legion. It's a 5/5 angel for 4 white with flying. Mentor, meaning whenever this creature attacks, you put a counter on a target attacking creature with lesser power. And when Light of the Legion dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on each white creature you control. Now, as far as Training, we have Griffwing Cavalry, which is a 2/2 human knight for 3 and a white. It has flying and training. That means whenever this creature attacks with another creature with a greater power, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then whenever it attacks, you can pay 1 and a white. If you do, target attacking creature without flying gains flying till end of turn. We also have the Parish Blade Trainee, which is a 1/2 human soldier for 1 and a white with training, but when it dies, you can put its counter on another creature you control. And we have the Griff Rider, which is a 2/1 human knight for 2 and a white with flying and training. Now, the thing with white +1/+1 counters is there's a ton of different ways to get them and different points you can get them. But we also get helpful things like Together Forever, which is an enchantment for white. When it enters the battlefield, we support 2, but then we can pay 1 and choose a creature with a counter on it, and when it dies, we can return it to our hand. We have Elharu Solemn Ritualist, which is 4 and a white for a 3/3 human monk. When he enters the battlefield, I can put a +1/+1 counter on each of 2 other creatures. And whenever a non-token creature I control dies with a +1/+1 counter on it, I make a 1/1 white spirit with flying. He also has partner, but it doesn't come up very often. Citadel Siege is 2 white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you choose cons or dragons. We're basically always going to choose cons, which is at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Armory of Iroas is a 2-mana equipment. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It has equip for 2. Great Sword of Tyr is 1 and a white for an equipment. With whenever a equipped creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and tap a creature defending player controls as equipped for a white. Lulu Loyal Holophant is a 3 and a white for a 3/2 Elephant Angel with flying. And at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control, then untap them. She also has choose a background. Abzan Falconer is a 2 and a white for a 2/3 human soldier with Outlast for a white, but each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. Anafenza Kintree Spirit is white for a 2/2 spirit soldier with whenever another non-token creature you control enters the battlefield under your control, you bolster 1. Regna's Sanction is 3 and a white for a sorcery. For each player you choose friend or foe. Each friend puts a counter on each creature they control. Each foe chooses 1 untapped creature they control and then taps the rest. Sparring Regimen is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you can learn, which in our case just means to discard and draw. But whenever you attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature and untap it. Felidar Retreat is 3 and a white for an enchantment. With landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield, we can either make a 2/2 cat or put a counter on each creature we control that gain vigilance. Keensight Mentor is 2 and a white for a 1/4 human cleric. When it enters the battlefield, you can put a vigilance counter on a non-human. So I included it mostly because our commander is a Gith. But for 1 and a white and tapping it, you can put a counter on each creature you control with vigilance. Mikaeus the Lunarch, X and a white for a 0/0 human cleric. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can tap him to put a counter on him, or you can tap him and remove a counter to put a counter on each other creature you control. Lunarch Aspirant is 1 and a white for a 1/1 human cleric. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a counter on a creature you control. And then we're going to round out this relatively quick deck look. I'm not entirely sure what I should call these. With the Ballista combo, which is Heliod Suncrowned, 2 and a white for a 5/5 god, indestructible as long as your devotion to white is less than 5. He isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or enchantment you control. And for 1 and a white, another target creature gains lifelink till end of turn. This combos with Walking Ballista, which is XX for a 0/0 construct. Enters with X +1/+1 counters on it for 4. You can put a counter on it, and then you can remove a counter to do a damage to a creature or a player. So theoretically, if you wanted to do this all in one turn, you would need 3 for Heliod. Then you would need an additional 2 to be able to give the Ballista lifelink. And the Walking Ballista would have to have at least 2 counters on it. So what you would do is you would pay 3, cast the Suncrowned, then you would have to have 4 mana for the Walking Ballista, and then an additional 2 to give it lifelink. So that's how you just go Infinite with damage and counters and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of it. And I have a problem with making white decks because they're all so different. But yeah, I think that'll do it. I am just very tired. And that should do it. Alright, thank you. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.